So welcome everybody to today's seminar that is given by Professor Ahimsa Campos-Arceiz from the Southeast Asian Research Institute, Biodiversity Research Institute. And he's going to tell us about the return of the elephants and other stories from tropical Asia's megafauna ecology and conservation. So welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, can you guys hear me well? I will try to speak loud. I was given a very difficult task by the local team is not to pass this line, and I don't know how to talk without moving around. And I'm inclined to go close to you, but I'm not allowed. So then just stand with me. It's a big pleasure to be in Doñana, to be in so many friendly faces, friends from a long time ago, from many different conferences. And it's a big honor, and I think you guys are the best research center in ecology and conservation in Spain, and that's a great place to be. Last time I came was like this, 2016. I was looking at the photo yesterday. Well, things have changed. We all change with years. Pedro hasn't changed, Irene hasn't changed, but Paco has changed, and so have I. And this talk was very interesting. This was organized by, I think, Eloy and Marcos Moleon and other people working on megafauna. And this morning, I think I was the first speaker that morning, and no one was paying too much attention. We were all like mind absent. And if you see what happened, this was 9th of November of 2016. Do you remember what happened that day? The 9th of November. That was the morning that we woke up and we had big news. Something happened in the US that day. Was the election day. So then we were pretty shocked. We're talking about megafauna, thinking, wow, things are changing. And I must say that 2016 was a transformative year for me. I think I lost, I want to say something about it. I lost my naivety, because I think until 2016, I used to be very naive about the role of science and education. I thought that we do research, we publish papers, we learn, we do better management, we do better conservation, the world gets better. I thought it was very linear and very simple. And that was, I know I was too naive for my age, but it's when I learned that things are very messy and things don't make sense, and people have different views to what we have. And when we do conservation, we are dealing with very complex systems, not only ecologically, but also socially. And I hope we all learn that and actually that same year I was with Irene a few months before, and it was Brexit election night. So remember we were together that night. So then for me it was an interesting learning time. So it was cool to prepare this talk and think about how things have changed. I have changed a lot since the last time I came. I moved my institution. So just to give a brief introduction, I'm from Spain, but I have been working outside of Spain for the last 20 plus years. I work in Japan, I work in Singapore, I work in Malaysia. And since 2020, I work at the Xishuangbanna Tropical Botanical Garden, which is part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Has anyone by any chance been in Xishuangbanna? Chengoren? Nichilama? You want to go, okay. You're very welcome. So just to give you a bit of context, Xishuangbanna is this little dot, and basically it's a botanical garden, and we live 40 kilometers away from Laos, 40 kilometers away from Myanmar, and very, very close, less than 100 kilometers from Thailand and from Vietnam. So it's Southeast Asia. It's within China, but it's a part of China that will surprise to most people. When you go there, it's very rich culturally. There are many minorities. The lot of biodiversity is tropical rainforest. There are elephants. And it's not what people think about China. I very much encourage you to interact with us. We are the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which is a very big research institution. This is my office. I happen to have the best office. This is our research center. I was very lucky when I arrived to that place. So I'm going to talk a bit of anecdotes. When I arrived to my place, I was supposed to have a little tiny normal office, but there was a new rule in China that directors couldn't have too big of an office. So then the director office became empty, and they had to give to an academic. And then I was around at the right time, and I got a very good office. And this is a very beautiful environment, and we have great research facilities. We have the tallest canopy crane. We have 2 canopy cranes to work in the rainforest. for people working on invertebrates, on anything that works on canopy. So it's a very good place and very interesting. This is my research group. So I'm the PI of the Megafauna, Ecology and Conservation group. There are a couple of new people who have joined after this photo that are not here. And we have people from, I think it's 7 countries now, 7, 8 countries. And we work all throughout Southeast Asia. So this map is from Ripple et al. 2016. I don't know if anyone here was co-author of the paper. So this in red, you see the place where you have more threatened megafauna in the world. So then our research team worked from Nepal all the way to Indonesia. This is our research area. And we have students from Laos, from Indonesia, from Nepal, from China, from Sri Lanka. And we have now also people from Cyprus, Malaysia, Singapore. And we work on these things, megafauna, ecology and behavior, ecological impacts of megafauna, and interactions with people. By interactions, normally we're talking about the negative interactions, human-wildlife conflicts. When, I guess you guys have human-wildlife conflicts with wild boar or with some of the carnivores here, but it's not the same dealing with conflicts with a wild boar that is dealing with an elephant. So then it's a very important part of the work we do, trying to understand how to deal with these issues. I like to think of my research group like this story. You probably know the story of the 7 blind men and the elephant. In China, it's the 8 blind men and the elephant. So then, you know how it works, right? So then someone is touching the belly, it looks like a wall, or someone is touching the leg, looks like a column. And I hope that my group works interdisciplinarily to get a big picture of how this system that involves people, landscapes, and animal behavior, how this triangle of things interact, and trying to get this kind of holistic and interdisciplinary approach to these problems. So today, after my introduction, I will talk a little bit about elephants in China, about how we work integrating elephant movement or animal movement into conservation, and a bit of the ecological function work we're doing. So then, I don't know if you knew that wild elephants in China, many people don't know that. Even China didn't know it. In the 1960s, Beijing sent people to Xishuangbanna to say, do we have elephants in China? Because they didn't know. And it was kind of, they began to collect this information. But if you see, 3,000 years ago, there were elephants all the way up to Beijing. Around 1,000 years ago, they were all the way to the Yangtze River. And for the last 200 years, they have been only in this part of southern China, close to Vietnam, and in this part of Yunnan. So Xishuangbanna is this place and this place. There was this retreat of the elephants. It was very, very fast and very intense. Elephants were losing range, and there was intense competition, deforestation, and hunting of elephants, until there was a bit bottleneck with around 100 elephants left here, a few elephants left here, and a few elephants left here. So by the 1990s, Chinese elephants were very close to extinction. I think they got it lucky, things changed, and then there was an inversion of the trend. And since then, the population has doubled or more than doubled. We have now around 350 elephants in China. That is small population globally, it's less than 1% of the global population. But the growth rate is very fast. Okay, they're growing very fast. They talk in China about a baby boom, elephant baby boom. There are many babies. Elephants in China, they are fat, and there are plenty of babies. And something very important, there is no poaching within China. And this can be a bit counterintuitive, but in China, if anyone kills an elephant, that person is going to go to jail 10 years, and it's going to be a very, very, very serious problem. So there is zero poaching in China. And I think the last real poaching was in 2007 or something like that. And since then, there have been a few cases of someone being very angry and killing an elephant because of conflict. But basically, elephants are pretty safe within China. They're very fat, and elephant males can grow throughout their life. So, and I think I'm expecting in 10, 20 years, we'll have all these monsters going around that you don't see in Asia. So in Asia, all the males get killed at some point. Every elephant male gets in trouble with someone, and someone eventually kills them, mainly because of conflict, a bit because of the ivory. But in China now they are not being killed and they are growing, and you have so many big monsters that get into mast. You know what is the mast? Is this physiological condition when elephants are into reproduction mode, and they become very aggressive and very stupid, and they do very silly things. And also, China, the Chinese government has decided that elephants are not allowed to go extinct. There are several species that are not allowed to go extinct. Tigers cannot go extinct, pandas cannot go extinct, and elephants cannot go extinct. So it doesn't matter what happens, they will not go extinct. That means that there are a lot of resources, and there's a very serious commitment. And you know, in China, if central government decides something, the power to act locally is huge. So then the amount of space for action is surprisingly high. So what we had is that as the number increased, what happened was this kind of a spread away from the refuge. Okay, so then most of the elephants were living in the forest in the 1980s, 1990s, but since then we have recorded 9 different dispersal events, which is kind of unusual for females. Elephant females have a home range and tend to live in the same place throughout their life, but we know of 9 cases in which a family of elephants said, you know what, this is crowded, I'm going somewhere else. And when they went somewhere else, they went outside of the protected areas. The protected area is the dark green area, and most of the new range is happening in places with lots of people, very fragmented landscapes, and there's almost no forest here. And there's no forest here. So then these are elephants living in very, very human-dominated landscapes. So this presents interesting challenges. Also, this is a transboundary population. These elephants move between Laos and China. I was recently in this part of Laos, and I was surprised to see that elephants are very shy in Laos. They don't come out because in Laos everyone has guns. And then elephants know that if you go out of the forest and you eat that corn or that rice, someone is going to chase you. And the same elephants here are very, very bold, and they are very comfortable walking anywhere. So it was interesting. We don't know of any elephant population right now in Myanmar here, but I heard recently of 2 individuals going around, so that's positive. Just a small amount of information. This population is very small. They're talking about just 20 elephants that is not communicating with the other population, and these elephants are genetically very different to the population. So then that's one of the key management issues. Elephants know that it's a transboundary population. We have in China, you have to behave well. It's better to follow the rules. So you have elephants crossing the border very properly, in a very orderly manner. This happened last year. An elephant came from Laos and then went back, and very well done. You know, they get the memos. They know how to behave. So the landscape has changed a lot. And if you have been in China recently, you will. And I think our Chinese friends here will know the economic development that has happened. The transformation that has happened in the last 40 years is very unprecedented at that scale. And that has implications for the landscape. So the Xishuangbanna is an area of around 20,000 square kilometers. And since the turn of the century, around 50% of the forest cover has been lost, but very importantly, the fragmentation has been very intense. Okay, so then the average forest patch has declined by 1 order of magnitude. So then right now, we have very small amount of forest and very small patches. And inevitably, any elephant at any given time is close to people. Even within the protected areas, you have many villages and a lot of agriculture inside. So even if an elephant would like to avoid people, it will be very difficult. And we have elephants living in this kind of landscape. This is in Monghai, the place I told you there was almost no forest. So you have paddy fields, you have sugarcane, you have rubber, you have a bit of paddy on the other side. And here you have a group of elephants spending the day under some trees. And these elephants don't eat much during the day because at night they can go around, and crops are much better than wild food. You know, if you have tried, I can tell you rice is much better than wild plants. And then these guys are very fat, very fertile, and they are basically spend the night here and spend the day here and spend the whole night moving around and eating things. There's very serious conflict. These are the same elephants from the previous photo, and the economic cost is very high. We're talking about millions of dollars annually, which again, at China level it's not a lot, but locally it means that almost a huge amount of farmers are affected by either by the direct conflict or by the risk of conflict. So then for everyone live, you have to think about what happens when elephants come and how you will cope with that. But I have been working in a number of countries. I began working in Sri Lanka, I work a lot in Malaysia, and I have worked in other Asian countries. And normally when we talk about human-elephant conflict, we're talking about an economic issue. It's about livelihood, it's about the cost. For example, in Malaysia, it's all about oil palm and rubber. Elephants cost a lot of money. But in China, the problem is a matter of human safety. So then the conflict is so intense that what happens is that elephants kill a lot of people. Anyone wants to give a guess of how many people wild Asian elephants kill in a year? How many people get killed by wild boar, by wolves? How many people do wolves and brown bears kill in Europe in 1 year? Zero, right? So Asian elephants kill easily 800 people per year. So when you think about this number, it's not a trivial thing. It's a very, very serious social issue. And what I saw moving from different kind of landscapes, different socio-ecological systems, when the society is well off, it becomes all about human safety. It's, in poor places of Sri Lanka or poor places of central India, people are very concerned about the crops, but they're used to that. But people in this kind of landscape, they're already pretty well off. They are farmers, but they're farmers that they're not poor. So then they are not willing to live with that thing in the head of, at night I go out and I might be killed, or my daughter might be killed. So it's a very important thing to understand the role of safety and the human safety in this picture. Just to give you a sense of how confidence, okay, I didn't tell you before, in the 1990s, the Chinese government took all the guns from people. People used to have guns, like in most rural societies, but all the guns were confiscated, and there were very severe penalties for anyone who kills something like an elephant. So then elephants learn that it's quite safe to go around. So then elephants are very, very confident. Compared with, it's very landscape and population to population. In some populations, elephants are very tame, and I think Jennifer works in Sabah. The elephants in Kinabatangan, they're pretty nice, well-behaved. You can go behind them, and there's like cows. And don't do this with elephants here or in central India, or some populations, elephants are very, very aggressive. And look at these guys, how confident they are. They come into villages, and this is everyday situation. Okay, it's happening every day. So then 350 elephants are causing a massive, massive headache to practitioners, to conservation organizations, local communities. For everyone, it's a big, big deal. And again, these elephants are not allowed to disappear. They will be here for the long term, but how to manage this situation? So then, don't worry, I don't have answers. I only have questions. So then, I hope you guys give me good ideas after this talk. So what is happening in China? The mitigation is a bit different to other places. So then, again, the main thing is human safety. Something very interesting, there is a very, very detailed monitoring of the elephant movements, and people have apps that they can see where the elephants are. We will never do this in Malaysia, for example, because there's poaching. So if you advertise the location of elephants, someone's going to go and kill the elephant. But again, in China, because poaching is not happening right now, you can advertise people, hey, don't go there because there are elephants going on. So then when elephants are outside protected areas, there is a team of 4 to 6 guys going around with a drone and really in lifetime telling people where elephants are. I don't know how is, and tomorrow I'm going to the field to see the monitoring systems here in Doñana, and I don't know how much information you're getting in real time, but this is going to be the future. In 20 years, 30 years, we'll be doing this with many populations. So there are a lot of camera traps that trigger automatic warning calls in the village. People have speakers and say, hey, elephants are coming, elephants are coming. Some villages are fenced to get the people fenced in. And at these kind of permanent fences that we cannot do in Sri Lanka because they're too expensive. But when society becomes affluent, you can invest long term. So then these fences are very expensive. And actually, my institute is fence as well. So we leave fence because if elephants come, we need to feel safe, and it's a good way. Elephants are not going to break this fence, but of course it's very expensive. You can do only in a few places. And very important, there is economic compensation. Without economic compensation, there is no way that people will agree to live with these animals. So then when elephants come and cause some damage, people get compensated, not the full price, but something that allows people to, to feel that it is not terrible. Elephants are coming, you just report, and it's a routine now. You just tell the local ranger, they will come, they do the report, and then you get your money. And there is work on doing habitat restoration. I like to think more of habitat management and expansion of protected areas. So I'm going to tell you briefly. I'm out of time. So I will skip too many details. You probably remember the story of these elephants that were walking to Kunming in 2021. Did you hear that story? That 17 elephants one day began walking, and they began to walk 15 kilometers from Xishuangbanna all the way to a very big city with 9 million people. So that was a very interesting adventure. I think I will not go into details. After the seminar, if anyone wants to talk, I will tell you stories. Less documented is that at the very same time, another group of elephants came to our botanical garden. And then botanical gardens are not designed to have wild elephants moving around. So that's when we decided to build a fence, and it was a very interesting situation. We're all researchers doing conservation work. We became stakeholders from the other side of the point, blocking access to our homes with trucks, and everyone panicking about the sampling plots and all these things. It was quite an intense situation. For me, it was good because as an animal ecologist working in a botanical garden, everyone questioned my job until the elephants came. It's okay, now you know why I'm working here. People blame me for the elephants. It was not my fault. Anyway, this was a very interesting case because there was a lot of media coverage. This was live streamed in China for 2 weeks. You guys remember the story, right? The news will open with, now the elephants have moved 30 kilometers, and the big female was drinking water, and the little baby did something, and everyone was following. I think it's the most followed animal, wild animals ever in history. For several weeks, everyone was watching what they were doing. And it was a very good opportunity because now with drones, it was very, very easy to see the behavior. What probably you are used to see elephants in African savanna, open environments. But for Asian elephants, there's not much way to see what they're doing. There are very few open environments where they live. So then people had access to very intimate behavior of these animals. They saw them being playful, being angry, being smart, solving problems, cheating. So it was a very interesting learning experience for the public. And there were a lot of papers coming out from this story. There was a bubble of papers, too many papers analyzing the same story. But just to give you an idea of the management efforts to deal with these elephants, there were 17 elephants going into places that elephants had been absent for 400 years, in high human density areas, into a big city with millions of people. So then the authorities mobilized 25,000 officers. Can you imagine? Just think about Doñana, when was the last time you called, hey, we need 25,000 people here? 1,000 drones, 15,000 vehicles. And this was just to deal with 17 elephants. So for me, it was very, very good chance to discuss with authorities, say, well, you need to be ready because as the population keeps growing, because they will continue growing, you need to allocate resources because this really takes a lot of resources. So then what triggered this movement? We don't know for sure. These are intelligent animals. They can make decisions that might not be very sensible. But basically what we have is a place that there is population growth, and there is actually, because of conservation, there is less food in the traditional home ranges. Because now the forest there's succession going on, and elephants don't eat the canopy, the elephants eat on the ground, so then there is less food for more elephants, so then they need to expand. And then in this context of dispersal events, there was a very severe drought in 2019, 1 year, very, very intense drought. So probably these two groups of elephants said, you know what, this is not working for me, let's go somewhere else. We analyzed the movements, and we described this as an event of Eruptive nomadism, so then elephants have stable home ranges. In Asia, we don't know any population that does migration. In Africa, we know that elephants are very flexible. Some populations have migration. Some individuals in populations migrate, some don't migrate. The same individuals might migrate some years, not migrate some years. So elephants are very intelligent animals. They can make decisions based on the context. So I think these guys just said, you know what, there is no food, I'm going somewhere else. The interesting thing is that they were moving in highly kind of modified environments. They were not using the natural habitat. They were following the crops. They were eating corn. It was the corn season, and they were going from corn to cornfield all the way north. And the good thing is that they were pretty okay. You know, we know that for animals like elephants, droughts have severe impacts on the demography. They have severe mortalities in these cases. This group was pretty healthy after 1 year and a half. They had 2 new babies. They did very well, so it worked out. They were lucky. If this happened 50 years before, probably they would have been killed after a few days, or after a few weeks. So we used this this event to develop a kind of a decision tree on trying to tell the authorities that this is a growing population. It's an expanding population. So then you need to think in the places where you have elephants, whether you want them or not, based on whether it's a protected area, not protected area. And if you welcome elephants, what to do, and if you don't welcome elephants, what you should be doing. But also very important, outside of the current range, elephants will continue expanding. So you need to be prepared to deal with conflict. You cannot just train people to deal with elephant presence overnight. You know, it's not the same putting your rice or your corn in the ground floor when there are no elephants, but if elephants are around, you don't put it there, you put it somewhere else, then somewhere up. So then try to be prepared before things happen. We have been doing other analysis. For example, there is a very clear mismatch between the elephant food resources in the protected areas. So then again, these are protected areas, and you can see these are the best foraging grounds for elephants. So then elephants are going to be going out. We know that. And at this moment, we are working on developing a new national park. And a national park in China is not the same as a national park here. So then national parks in Spain or in Europe will be like nature reserves in China. That will be the same level. A national park is like a super park, something that Beijing manages directly with a lot of resources. There was now 5 national parks in China. They're all in the tens of thousands of square kilometers. For example, the Panda National Park is 27,000 square kilometers. It involves 3 provinces, a lot of resources. So we are now working on this, but for 4 years, the proposal has been rejected because there are so many people, it's so fragmented that we don't know how to define the national park in terms of the concept of the Chinese national park. So trying to find a way that we can integrate this kind of mix between people and conservation. And also, for example, in the Chinese legislation, you cannot cut trees in the national park. But if you want to keep elephants inside the park, you will need to to create habitat there. We have also been modeling the range expansion in relation to things like temperature, precipitation, human density. We see that there's a tendency to go with warmer temperatures. But very important, this is a map of the potential habitat stability. And elephants are here right now, but there is a lot of potential area very far away from the current range. So there is something that we need to think about. Do we want to have elephants in places that haven't been in a long time? And when we look at the whole elephant range, in most elephant range countries, there will be loss of habitat. Only in Yunnan, in China, there will be, by the end of the century, more habitat available. So then there will be habitat. Ecologically, it's feasible. Now the question is it socially feasible? Can we have more elephants in these places? But this is not an isolated phenomenon. In Spain, you have been dealing with the expansion of bears, wolves, lynx, luckily, and you know it's happening with tigers in northern China. You know the story of leopards in Mumbai or in Kuala Lumpur, living in high human density areas. So then we will have more success dealing with these kind of populations, and that's good. That's our job to get more of this increased population of these kind of animals. But we know there will be more future. So we need to to prevent. We need to be able to be prepared for this increased conflict. So then I will talk a bit of some of our work with the elephant movement. This is work from Malaysia. In this case, we collar 100 elephants, 50 in Peninsular Malaysia and 50 in Borneo, in Sabah. We have the biggest data set of animal movement in Southeast Asia. And when we look at the home range of these animals, the home ranges are very big, very often bigger than many of the protected areas in these places. So we have individuals with home ranges in Sabah in over 1,000 square kilometers. Many parks are 350, 500, 600 square kilometers. So then we need to expect that these animals will not be in the protected area. But every manager hopes that they will be in the protected area. That's what they want. And when we look at the habitat, the preference, we see that this is inside protected areas in Peninsular Malaysia, in Sabah, and this is away up to 1 kilometer, 1 to 3 kilometers, 3 to 5 kilometers. Elephants prefer outside the protected area. So then it's not, no one is forcing them out. It's the preferred choice of habitat. And this is difficult to communicate to practitioners because they create a protected area. Say, okay, now elephants can stay in the protected area, but elephants don't want to do that. Here we analyze a habitat preference in relation to human-elephant conflict. We see very high overlap. Again, elephants are seeking for areas that is not the natural environment, is where the crops are. Elephants are not looking for good forest. Elephants like bad forest. So then as we do more good conservation inside protected areas, elephants saying, hasta luego, Lucas, and then they're going somewhere else, right? I think young people don't know what is hasta luego, Lucas, but I hope some old people know what I'm talking about. So I'm trying to tell this story to practitioners in the region that elephants are not going to be in the protected area. We need the protected areas, so don't get me wrong. They are really the core. We know that elephants don't go more than a few kilometers from the forest, and they always stay, depends on the country and the type of ecological system, but they tend to stay near the protected area. But when you are very crowded in the protected area and there is not much food, and outside is full of food, and in places like China you feel safe, elephants will go out and say, this is great, thank you guys. So just, we need to keep that in mind. We are working on connectivity. We are right now working on a connectivity analysis at the whole range. And since I'm in Doñana and you do a lot of work on plant-animal interactions, I'm going to talk about this work a little bit. I have been doing work on seed dispersal for a long time, work with Luis Santa Maria almost 20 years ago. And these are mango seeds that I found in one elephant dung pile. There were 152 mango seeds in one defecation. So that elephant was moving around with over 1,000 seeds in the gut. Okay, and that's something that only these kind of animals can do. If I guess you have mango here in Andalusia, don't try to swallow the seed. It's not a good idea. You can just spit. Big diversity of fruit types, very big seeds. It's a Borassus flavellifera, a palm, defecated by an elephant. And of course, elephants defecate in a very suitable way, far away from the mother tree. I'm going to show you a very short clip of how elephants eat fruits. And normally I like to compare with bears and tapirs. So this is a chempedak. It's a very big fruit. So the elephant takes 10 seconds to swallow this fruit with 35 seeds. And it can consume many of them. So then I was giving fruits until I ran out of money. And then elephants never say no. They keep on eating, And that's really is different to what smaller herbivores can do. So then in terms of scale, and the video continues, I will just skip. When we began to study seed dispersal by elephants in Malaysia, we found that we didn't find seeds in the dung, and it's because there was no fruiting going on. So we did a 6-year study in which we monitor every month, and then we found that there are these kind of peaks. So then you could do a master study, a PhD study, in which in 16 months there was no single seed being dispersed. But you need to study over a long time to get a big picture. We're talking about animals that they move at a spatial scale and a temporal scale And then you cannot reach conclusions based on a 2-year study or a master level study. You need to go much, much farther beyond that. But it's a very complex forest. So then we have dangerous animals, like this is real photos from field work. And we have poachers, and the canopy is 70 meters high. So then how do we, I think you guys work on direct observations, camera traps. We cannot put camera traps all over there. It's too difficult. So then we began to rely on local indigenous knowledge. So we have really knowledgeable communities. We think that this is really the last generation of people who know these things. So we use local ecological knowledge to identify interactions and to identify the type of interactions and the consequences for the plants. So then based on this, we build our cities frugivory and cities personal networks, talking about very complex networks with 165 plants and 30 plus animal groups. And based on this, once we have the network, we were able to begin to answer questions about what kind of traits are more important. In this case, we found that this is in Balung Temengor, in northern peninsula Malaysia. What we found is that the most important dispersers in this system are animals like gibbons, elephants, rats, and hornbills, and most of them are threatened or becoming very rare. Okay, so we're dealing that the most important dispersers, as you know from this kind of work, are the most vulnerable. We are now also working on the diet of elephants and looking at how the feeding impacts ecosystems. So then we did observations with captive elephants in natural landscapes. We take captive elephants that were wild-born into the forest, and we see what they eat, but most important, we see how they eat, what they break, and what happened to the plants. So we found first that elephants are very selective. So then they have very clear preferences, and these are very different from forest environments to disturbed secondary forest. And so we see that one single elephant feeding in this kind of forest can damage almost 40,000 saplings per year. So then elephants in the forest, there's no grass, so elephants will go and just eat saplings, and often they will break, they will uproot, and the impact is very high. So then in this forest, we estimate that elephants are damaging between 0.2 to 0.6% of the saplings every year. But keep in mind that every tree stays as a sapling for many years. Okay, so then the risk of being killed by elephants probably is in a few percentage points. I'm going to show you how elephants feed, okay, and that will be my last slide. So then, again, we are working with different herbivores, but look at how this female is very fond of this liana. And something that the native people always told us is elephants, when the forest has elephants, the elephant is very clean. When elephants disappear, the forest becomes messy because elephants are feeding and breaking things. So then look at this female. She was very stubborn on this liana. I don't know if you can hear. She spent 30 minutes pulling this liana, hitting, using, elephants have trunks. They can manipulate very well. They have the tushes, the teeth that they can break. They kick the liana. She does very good job pulling it out. After 30 minutes, the liana was no more. It was gone. This liana probably was pretty old. It's maybe 5-6 centimeters diameter liana. So then there is no other animal that is going to take care of this liana. So then this is a kind of impact that only animals like elephants can do. So we are talking about filtering, ecological filtering through diet selection, so that they prefer some plants over others. And then plants respond differently. Some plants survive very well, some plants don't. So at the end, a forest with and without elephants will be very different. We are working on different aspects of the impacts and trophic cascades. Then in a couple of years, we'll be able to tell you more about this. We have been doing some work also with Sumatran rhinos. Sumatran rhinos are the most, maybe not officially, I used to think until a few months ago that they were the most threatened big mammal in the world. Maybe Javan rhinos are more threatened. Both of them are only left in Indonesia in very small populations and declining very fast. So then we used different approaches to study the seed dispersal by Sumatran rhinos. We found that they are not like elephants. They do different things. They disperse different things, they move differently, and then the role is complementary. Okay, so there is not a lot of redundancy. We are currently working on the foraging impacts of Sumatran rhinos. This is very unique work. We want to be the last people to study this species in these conditions. And I can tell you, they are very different to elephants. The feeding behavior is so different, the impacts are so different. So then what we have is forests that used to have elephants, big cattle, rhinos, tapirs, and every forest. There is no longer any forest in Southeast Asia that contains elephants, wild rhinos, and wild tapirs. There is no place. And the last was probably 5 years ago. So it's in our lifetime. It's happening in front of our eyes. So you know this very well, that we live in a definite world, and this has implications. In the case of Southeast Asia, there are so many species that they are living right now. Okay? So I'm very shocked to see, during my professional career, the amount of rhino population that have gone. And we don't have any formula that is working right now. And probably the last individuals will be in captivity. And let's see how long they survive. We do a lot of work with practitioners. We do a lot of education and training things. So just to finalize, China right now is in a good place to conserve its small elephant population, but this will be with very intense conflict. And it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be very difficult from a management point of view. The elephant walk to Kunming was a very unusual situation, but after this, we have been exploring and we found a couple of other cases that elephants move hundreds of kilometers in the case of a drought, in the case of a very severe habitat loss. And we are just beginning to understand ecological impacts of megafauna in Asia. We know much more about savanna forest elephants or savanna megafauna. So just one more thing. We just launched a new journal in our institution, the Integrative Conservation. And part of my visit here is to try to get you guys to submit papers. So then I will be trying to convince you to submit something. It's a good journal. It's free to publish until the end of next year. We expected, there was no Asian Journal of Conservation until we launched this journal. So our part, what we wanted is to have a locally produced journal, locally edited, locally published. We're very lucky to have Pedro giving us a seminar in February. I don't remember how many people were online, but there were about 3,000 people that day. So then Pedro attracted 3,000 people to the seminar. How many people do we have today watching online? I'm not Pedro, I know Pedro. So I just want to say thank you to Luis for hosting me. Thank you, Irene, because I think today was your seminar. And thank you, Pedro, for your talk, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for this fantastic talk. I assume there are plenty of questions.
Okay, thank you very much. That was so much fun. And the elephant population is growing right now. It's growing. Can you see changes in the attitude of the population, the human population, as a consequence of this population growth? And since it's protected and it's wonderful that there is such concern to maintain the population, are there proactive actions to say, okay, elephants are not here yet, but we expect that they will arrive in 10, 20 years. Yeah, are you starting to conservation actions or that could be, to get the population ready for when the elephants arrive? What are the changes in the human population during this time? So
in my case, we're working with authorities to try to get them to take this kind of action. And we're doing more like surveys to understand what is the situation right now. Asian elephants are very unique in that all over the range, people tend to like them, okay? So then it's something that, from a European perspective, is a bit difficult to grasp because people love elephants in a way that I have seen people crying out of emotion when they see an elephant. Rural people, not urbanita. And these people are very pro-conservation, so we do the different psychological scales of pro-conservation behavior. They rank very high compared with other societies, but NIMBY, not in my backyard. Everyone loves elephants, everyone wishes them very well, far away. So then, I think what we need to do is to reduce the cost. I think the theory says you need to increase the benefits for people living next to the wildlife. But I think we cannot do that. The scale is too big to say everyone will benefit from having elephants. And given the cultural background, the key point is not to have very high cost. So then making sure that people don't suffer very high cost, particularly in terms of safety, by living with elephants. So then increasing the warning systems and finding ways that people feel safe to move around, I think that's the key point. The economic aspect is now okay, taken care of, but people need to feel that, okay, I will not be threatened by having elephants next to my home.
You only touched a little bit about upon climate change. So you mentioned this drought in 2019, and then you also said, I think, something about this range increase in Yunnan due to climate change. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on why climate change is favoring these elephants in some places, but it's not favoring elephants in other places.
So there has been a lot of discussion about how climate change will affect negatively animals like elephants. I don't think it will be a very big factor. I mean, it will be through secondary kind of second order effects or through human behavior. But in terms of elephants are super generalist. They live from very hot environments to relatively cool environments, from very dry environments to very humid environments. So I think they are very well adapted to a wide range of environmental conditions. And again, if you look at the ecological setups where they live, it goes from equatorial forest in Indonesia to dry forest in Sri Lanka. So I think the main impact is going to be how humans respond to climate change. So then when you start to create new crops, it's going to be on natural habitats. So I think that's going to be, I don't have a clear prediction of what's going to work. But in terms of elephants, I think they will do fine with climate change per se, not taking into account human behavioral changes.
Okay.
And okay, thanks a lot. It was super interesting. I have two interrelated questions. One is, it clashes a bit with our idea of nature conservation, but how do you see the idea, or has it been tried to have production area around national parks or protected areas of crops and similar things simply devoted to be feeding areas for elephants, so they are a buffer against conflicts with humans? And the second thing is, if you are successful in conserving mega herbivores, they don't have top-down regulations, so you will end up in a situation in which the population is too large and you will have to do cooling. So how do you see that will happen in China, for example?
Yeah, good point. The first one, right now there is something called elephant canteens, where people plant crops, just to plant crops. Now they're planting non-native grasses for elephants next to the villages, which I'm against. But in conservation, very often you don't do what is the best from an ecological point of view. Sometimes you need to deal with people's desires to take some action, and so I think people have a strong. They're very keen on doing that kind of elephant canteens. I think it's not good because you don't want to attract elephants to it next to the village, because elephants can keep on eating. They eat here, they go to the village next. So then it's not working to repel them from human settlements. And what I'm advocating for is for creating disturbed environments in the protected areas, which is not allowed right now in the legislation. So then now we're dealing with this kind of a conflict of policies that conservation says you cannot manage protected areas, particularly within the core protected areas. And as a consequence, this new national park for elephants is not going to be a very good elephant habitat, and elephants will be coming out. So then it requires a very deep discussion with authorities, very high level. Everyone knows locally, but it's a national law. So then we're trying to think how we can deal with a way to do management that is within the law. The second question, we are working now on a conceptual paper in which we are advocating that at some point you have too many elephants and you need to remove them. So then removing them is a culturally specific thing. Could be taking them into captivity, could be culling them, could be translocating them into new ranges, but you cannot have an ever-growing population of elephants in those landscapes where the only food is corn and rice, right? And right now, no Asian country does any Asian elephant culling. It's an endangered species. Some subspecies are critically endangered, and it's culturally not acceptable. In Sri Lanka, the director of the wildlife department was fired a couple of times, different directors, because of one elephant was killed. So then, culturally, it's a big challenge, but I think at some point you have too many elephants, and there needs to be a plan about what does it mean having too many elephants, and what are the management options in that particular context.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Ahimsa. Very interesting and many interesting questions, but just a quick one. Among all those situations of human-elephant conflicts, how predictable are they? I mean, how generalized? Would it be easy to make a prediction, a general prediction about what are the environmental settings that where those human-elephant conflicts arise? Are they related to behavior of the group, to collective behavior of the group of elephants, or do you know that there might be caused by some particular individuals and by personality effects of certain individuals in certain situations? Do you have information about that?
We are working on that. It's very difficult because it's highly variable, and it's varied by population. Some populations, only a few males do crop grading. In some populations, everyone does it. I think it tends to be with two things. One is how much the elephants need these resources. So then, in some populations, we know that elephants have plenty of natural food, but it's better to eat rice than eating the natural food. It's more cost effective. So you have some males doing that. In some populations, so fragmented that forest is only a refuge during daytime, and females go out to eat crops because there is nothing else. So then they need that food to survive. And also we know that based on the population history, some populations are very aggressive. So in some populations, elephants attack people proactively. Elephants see a person and attacks. In some populations, no. In some populations, elephants are very shy and they will avoid people. So then we are now working on human attacks. We're doing a global model to understand what are the contexts that explain the attacks to people. It has to do with the landscape, has to do with the history, it has to do with also human behavior. And I think the prevalence is very low. So at the scale that you can do effective prediction is too broad. So you can identify hotspots, big areas with high risk, but it's not going to work to be able to really do pinpointing at human individual level. So I think in that case, combining this kind of broad scale predictions with local on the ground monitoring is the most effective way. And also training people that if you have elephants, and we have, you can go to YouTube and say, just look for stupid people moving near elephants. In Sri Lanka, people like to go with a motorbike near elephants, people get killed. So then there's some element of we can also modify human behavior to reduce risk. And for crops, I think the region is developing very fast. So then my vision for 20, 30 years from now is that the economic side will be taken care of. We will be able to pay for this. We need to be able to make sure that people feel safe enough to coexist with these animals.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahimsa. It was super cool. I was wondering for the other side of the story about we know the conflict with the human for the crops and so on, but what happens with the forest when we have a lot of elephants? Are they really, do you see many ecological changes? Are they sustainable also for the forest side of the story?
Elephants are part of the forest. I think in Asia, Asian elephants are not like African savanna elephants. So African savanna elephants can destroy forest. Asian elephants, we have no evidence that they can cause deforestation. So they can produce disturbance, and they affect the diversity, the composition, and the structure of the forest. But they will not create a big gap, for example. I have no evidence of that happening. So what happens is that you get a bit of a filtering process in which, as I was saying before, forests with elephants are clean. You can walk around. The local, the Orangas from Malaysia, they don't like when there are no elephants because you cannot go barefoot because you have more thorns, you have more things growing than the story. But with elephants, things are cleaner, the lianas are cleaner. It's much, the structure is different. So definitely have an impact. And it's in my point of view, it's a good impact for the forest. Elephants belong to forest and should be there. Also what we have is that probably 500 years ago, most elephants in Southeast Asia were living in the forest. And they were living at very low densities, struggling to find food, so we have to move big distances, eat any food they find, eat many resources. But nowadays, elephants in these landscapes, they're living in the forest edges, eating grasses from the disturbed environment, eating crops, and they don't bother to walk very far in the forest. There is no need to look food like before. So then the ecological impacts have changed because what it is outside the forest.
Thank you.
There's time for one quick question.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious to know, in terms of the seed dispersal, the role of the elephants in these human landscapes. Is that something you're looking at? I mean, they're effective as vectors outside the forest in terms of, I don't know, weed dispersal maybe, or increasing connectivity between forests and other landscapes and so on?
Not right now. We're doing a bit of work in the forest, but from my previous work, I can tell you that elephants are vectors. So then, for example, in Sri Lanka, it's very clear they are dispersing from, forest seeds into outside the forest. They can promote regeneration, and they're also dispersing outside seeds into the forest. So then they can also disperse, fast-growing plants and early succession plants, and even dispersing invasive plants. They can disperse over long distance.
Okay, with that, thank you so much. Also, thank you so much for attending, and see you next week.
Thank you.